And away we go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome, one and all, to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk. And of course, we will be having a discussion about what is going on in the world today, what's going on in the news, read through some news clips, and have a little bit of conversation with the people that are able to join us for the live portion. And if you're listening and not able to see and you'd like to join us for the live portion, you can find us on YouTube Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University, simultaneously broadcasting, podcasting on both channels, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon as we get ready to dive in. And of course, for those of you who are listening and not able to see as well, I do read through as many of the comments as I reasonably can to help everybody to keep up with the conversation, as it were. Being joined today by three felines in the room. Daniel, who some of you can see lounging in the chair behind me. I've also got Little Girl on the floor. And then Dusty on the boxes back there, keeping me company, as it were, as I do my daily thing. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that have chimed in thus far in the live portion. Helter is here. Dragon is here. D'Lo, Stefan, Brian, Cyberjack Sr. have chosen to say hello. Glad you could make it today, guys, as we are ready to dive off and see what is going on. And, we're going to start with Fannie Willis. Fannie Willis. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I guess I won't know which one is right until I hear her say it. I know most people would probably prefer to call her Fannie Willis. Fannie, are you okay? Yeah, in the news again because of the mega endorsements that she has received as she runs for re-election to her position. Heavy endorsements from the religious community in Georgia, more specifically the Atlanta area, and more to the point, the black mega churches, giving her serious endorsements. Not just endorsements, but really kissing her ass. It is embarrassing. And I hesitate before I open the article up here. Something wrong with the cable. Hold on a second. There we go. A little malfunction there, but we're okay. I hesitate almost to say it, but the reality of it is, if I was a black person and I was attending any of these churches at this point, I would be embarrassed. How can you keep attending these churches when you see how the people running them are? But, they don't really teach anything from the Bible in these churches. And I guess the attendants have just come to expect that. So nobody should be surprised, right? And Unknown Nose is here. It says here, but not here yet. But here we are. And this is a local story. I don't know how huge this is circulating. And I think I have a couple of video clips too, if I can get to them, to show you exactly what I'm talking about. There you see the headline: Fulton County DA Fannie Willis, or Fannie Willis, endorsed by Georgia faith leaders. And there she is, getting her ass kissed up on the podium. Warm Monday morning outside Big Bethel AME Church on historic Auburn Avenue, and it is big. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis received the endorsement from an assortment of Georgia faith leaders. By all indications, Willis will easily win the Democratic Party's nomination on May 21st. Her lone challenger in the primary is Christian Wise Smith. Smith is a former Atlanta solicitor and prosecutor in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Willis says during her tenure at Fulton County DA, those leaders stood by her when the times were hardest, when she felt alone, and when she needed a helping hand. These men are the men that lead our community, Willis exclaimed, and you wonder why black people in America are in so much trouble. I mean, I know it's an unpopular thing to say, but just look at these people. They are the men that pray for me. They are the men that offer me and my family protection. For me, that's starting to be a real thing in the last 4 years. Yeah, the women, the men that pray for you, the ones that when they stand at the throne of judgment in the end of days, they will hear the phrase, "Get away from me, you workers of iniquity, for I never knew you." The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I, I added that part. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad once said the most vulnerable person in the nation is the black woman. And with that in mind, yeah, because Lord knows the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is trustworthy too. The faith leaders met with Willis, pledging to support her while she is in the fight. There was a heavy security presence during the press conference. The watchful eyes of armed guards and snipers perched along nearby rooftops were keeping watch on the proceedings. That tells you everything you need to know. Why is it every time somebody big in a democratic way, and she's not even that big, why do they need so much security? You know, that's reminiscent of the 24,000 National Guard troops that were required for President Biden's inauguration. Never been done before. She needs snipers watching out for her. Seriously. It is the new normal for Willis. On May 3rd, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia announced charges against Mark Schultz, 66, of Chula Vista, California. He was indicted by federal grand jury in Atlanta on charges of transmitting interstate threats to injure the Fulton County DA because of her prosecution of former President Donald Trump. I never heard that before. Schultz appeared in federal court in San Diego to answer the charges. Schultz will be arraigned in Atlanta in June. So why does she need snipers watching for her if Schultz is already in frickin' jail in California? Just asking. And it goes on to talk about missing the whole trial and Donald Trump and the missing votes. It says, according to this, it says 11,700 votes missing in 2020. Have they been found? We've been able to curtail the gang problem and bring crime down by more than 25%, Willis explained. Homicides are down more than 21%. That's real. Those aren't just numbers. Those are mamas that get to go home and still hug their baby. I don't know if that's true or accurate, but I have heard lawmakers in Georgia, and I called out Stacey Abrams for all the good it does, because I'm like nobody. Called out Stacey Abrams in videos for lying about statistics like this, because you can find the actual statistics and do comparisons. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Are gang violence actually down 25%, or are you just not arresting them anymore, for one thing? Let me see. I'm trying to see if there's anything here that talks about the things that they were saying. The preachers, let me see. I want to give a caveat that this is a fact. This is, in fact, a ecumenical gathering of preachers, says Bryant. I need you to see the light behind me with my symbolism and with substance, that they are all men. This is not out of misogyny. It is out of clear messaging. The responsibility in this election is for black men to step up to the plate. This will not even be a debate. It won't even be a question. It won't even be a contentious. So because she's a black woman, men have to actually, black men have to automatically vote for her, is what he's suggesting here. And who is that? Dr. Jamal Bryant. So the group endorsing Willis includes Georgia AME Bishop Reginald Jackson, Reverend Timothy McDonald, Dr. John Foster, Dr. Cynthia Hale, Dr. Jamal Bryant, Dr. Barbara Willis Skinner, Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley, Reverend Shannon Jones, Reverend Andre Osborne, and others. No one is above the law, Willis said. I don't care how rich you are, how powerful you think you are, who your daddy is, what your political party might be, how much money you think you got, and how evil your supporters are. I don't care how many times they threaten me. I will gladly leave this place knowing I did God's work. Wow. Wow. And lightning didn't strike that podium. So no one's above the law. So the misdirection of funds, which is illegal, lying under oath, which is illegal. I know it's not illegal anymore to commit to be a fornicator and lead a man into adultery, but she did that too, and she's getting the endorsement of these bishops and ministers and reverends. But no one's above the law except for her and her friends, I guess. Raccoon Eyes has joined us, as well as Donna Beaver, who reminds us, thumbs up, like, and share. Yes, please do. And Chillin' Dave says, lying is the new normal. Well, it's always been normal. You just didn't get away with it quite as much as you used to. And they at least made an effort to hide it. They at least made an effort to hide it. It's just out in the open now. It's sickening. And I'm going to open up a Red State article here really quickly. I think this might have some better quotes. So the endorsement of Fani Willis may just be the funniest ever, is what they suggest. And there's Dragon says, these preachers are saying that corruption and sin is okay. These preachers ought to be ashamed of themselves. They should, but they're not, because they're not legitimate. They're not legitimate. Again, they all have doctorates, probably from seminary universities. But you go to seminary university, it's like business college for churches. You learn how to run a church. You don't learn how to interpret the Bible. You don't learn anything from the Bible, pretty much. Again, my wife is a graduate from a seminary university. She went there wanting to learn more about the Bible and couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Okay, so it says, as we have reported, and there she is. As we have reported, Fani Willis is in the middle of an election race running again for Fulton County District Attorney. She blew off a debate the other day, forcing her Democratic primary opponent to appear against an empty podium, perhaps a fitting description of her candidacy. So I'm looking for where they have some quotes here from these people. Okay. But in addition to Willis's ridiculously entitled response to questions, there was at least one other moment that went completely off the tracks when it came to her and its comments from Reverend Anthony Motley. Motley started out saying he was honored to stand with the incredible district attorney, calling her a courageous woman, and then went off the rails. Is this a video clip? I can play it. It says, God has handpicked her. She is representing Christ and the kingdom. God is with you. The angelic army is with you. Your name will go down in the annals of history in heaven and on earth. Wow.
I stand with my good friend, Dr. Tim and Bishop Jackson and Brian and all of those who are gathered and all of those who are scattered, not present physically here today, but stand with this courageous woman.
There we go.
This woman who, like Queen Esther of old,
God,
has come into the kingdom for such a time as God has handpicked her.
Right.
For this moment. This is her moment.
Wow.
And those who don't even have a keen prophetic eye can plainly see that God is in the midst of all that is taking place, because this woman, I stand with her, and we stand with her.
Yes, sir.
Because when I saw this fella come on the scene, this Florida fella, it occurred to me after watching him just for a short while,
I almost don't know what to say. It's embarrassing.
that all of the, and this is what came to my mind, all of the resources of hell
All right.
has been made available.
To what? The Atlanta churches? I had to stop and say that. All the resources of hell have been made available to the collective body of faith leaders in the Atlanta district. Apparently, the stuff that they are saying and claiming here, God is with her. She has an angelic army. Her name will go down in the annals of history in heaven and earth. She's representing Christ and the kingdom, quotes from this endorsement. She represent, I'm pretty sure that Yeshua, Jesus, would not endorse fornication, adultery, theft, and bearing false witness, lying on the stand, or gossiping out of turn, saying things that are not true to manipulate people, which she's been shown to do. And the stealing is still up in the air because of the misrepresented funds and all the money that was paid to her little boyfriend, and whether or not it's still unclear if they can prove that she financially benefited from the income that he was receiving, which I'm sure she did because she's already shady enough. But I have to say that's an opinion at this time until such time that they can prove it. Nature Nerd says if you get away with a crime, it's a trap because you'll get in even more trouble with a bigger crime with more consequences you do next. It'll catch up to these crooks eventually. Yeah, tell that to Al Sharpton. And H12 indicates with emojis that he's getting sick to his stomach. I bet. And Helter says if these are truly the faith leaders of Georgia, no wonder the place is so crooked and screwed up and full of injustice. I know. And Unknown Knows says, I don't gamble, but $5 says this guy's a Marxist. Nature Nerd says pastors promoting false prophet crooks. No kidding. That's disheartening. That's hard to listen to. And again, these are faith leaders. These are bishops and reverends and ministers with doctorates, most of them, that are the big church and community leaders in the Atlanta area, in the big churches, the rich churches, the ones that Hillary Clinton visits when she comes to town, where, you can do all things through taking a line of biblical text out of context, where we don't read the Old Testament and we don't really read the New Testament either. We just select a sentence or two from out of a cherry-picked portion of the New Testament and spin a sermon out of it that has something to do with either voting Democrat or passing the plate in the end. And you wonder why so many people want to turn away from the modern church. This is humiliating. They know this woman is dishonest, openly dishonest, has one person running against her, probably doesn't stand a chance. These ministers up there telling people, quote from the previous article, if you're a black man, there's no debate, there's no discussion. You need to automatically just vote for this woman because she's black. She's a crook and she's dishonest. She had a relationship with a married man, ruined their relationship, destroyed that marriage, but vote for her because of the color of her skin. Yeah, that'll work out great. Unknown Knows says, am I wrong in saying churches far and wide are disenfranchising the faithful? Yes. As they pander to fringe minorities, or they pander to parties. They're more worried about collecting money than anything else, more worried about maintaining their 501c3 charity status. I don't think churches should endorse anyone. I don't think they should endorse anyone. Carrick is here. Glad you could make it today, Carrick. But this is, to me, this was just really disturbing. Compared her to Queen Esther, as you heard, compared her to Queen Esther of old, said that she came into the kingdom such as a time that God had handpicked her for the moment. and that all the resources of hell have been made available to this man from Florida, which I guess is a reference to Donald Trump, even though he's actually from New York. He said, here's another quote, "They stood with Willis because she stands for what's right. She stands for what's right. She is going to represent Christ and the kingdom and against the lies." Fani Willis is against lies. And then the writer of the article asks the question, did he check her testimony during the hearing about whether to boot her and or Nathan Wade from the Trump case? God is with you, he says. Angelic army is with you. Your name will go down in the annals of history in heaven and on earth. Yeah. It'll be written in a book somewhere. Maybe not the way that they would like, but it'll be written in a book after all. Monkey says this might be a stretch, but the modern Christianity is why people go atheist or towards a more orthodox version or even Muslim. Yeah, at least Muslims will give you some structure. They may not be right, but there's some structure there. There's no structure in these modern Christian churches. And a term I like to use a lot is modern Christian construct, because many of the concepts that you find in the modern Christian church would not have even been discussed 20 years ago. It's all modern ideas, but people just assume that that's Christianity, and it's not. It really isn't. And New York Patriot says, I wish someone would just stand up in press conference and say she had a relationship with a married man. How could the church back her up? I wish they would. I wish they would. She's biblically speaking, a fornicator, because she herself is not married. She is a fornicator, which from a biblical definition would still get her a nice head full of stones. He would still stone her at the gates of the city for being a fornicator. Just saying. Just saying. I know we can't do that kind of stuff anymore. But this is embarrassing. And then you hear the people in the crowd. I know that's right. I heard that. Okay. We'll support anybody based on the color of their skin. Doesn't matter how crooked or dishonest they are. All you need is that color for criteria. And that's how you end up with people like this. That's how you end up with Al Sharpton being an activist as long as he has, or Jesse Jackson, men who have done nothing for the communities they claim to represent. Al Sharpton, who used to endorse, some of you might remember the commercial ads, used to endorse a company for, I forget which one, for car title loans. Like, how many times do you think Al Sharpton needs to go out and get a car title loan? How often do you think that occurs? You can't trust these people. I see Moki is here, as well as Kimberly. Glad you could make it. New York Patriot said, Monkey took the words from me. I was just going to say that this is the reason why the church is in decline. They're more concerned with putting butts in the seats than anything else. And they use, and here's another modern Christian construct, oh, Jesus loves everybody. And he was friends of thieves and prostitutes and fornicators and all this other stuff. And he was friends of this and that. And he hung out with prostitutes and did this. There's nothing biblically to support that. Nothing. Being willing to talk to these people, to try to reach them. And then, by the way, if he offers absolution, I forgive you, go and do what? Sin no more. I.e., you can't keep doing that if you want forgiveness. You have to stop your evil behavior permanently. No, he just loves you unconditionally, and you can just do whatever you want. And we'll invite you into our church, and you can just hang out, and we'll pander to that, and you end up contaminating the church. That contaminates the church. You ruin the purity of it. But that's where we are. And that's, again, a modern Christian construct. That's something that, 20, 30 years ago would have been unheard of. You can't be in the church and you're still doing this. No, dude, go somewhere else. Now it's, oh, come on in, and, we'll just ignore whatever's wrong with you because Jesus loves you. And they don't even understand the biblical definition of the word love. And Moki wants to see a cat. This is, can we see your cat? I have 3 in the room. They're all resting quietly. I can show you one here for a moment. I won't disturb those 2. There's, see, there's 2 sleep. You can't even see them. There's 2 on the boxes over there. And then there's Daniel sitting in the chair. Daniel, you want to say hi for a minute? I'll put you back. Come here, buddy. Come here, Daniel. Oh, don't be upset. It's all right. Daniel, everybody. Dusty's brother. I know you want to go back to your nap. It's all right. I'll put you back. There you go. And it does drive people away. It does drive people away because it's disturbing. And then if you really actually read your Bible and study it, because it's not enough to just read it. You can read a Bible over and over and over again and not understand it. You have to study it. You have to understand the history of the time period. You have to understand the social structure of the time period in which it was written. You have to understand not just the translation of the words, but the definition of the words from that time, which don't always mean the same thing. And I use love and hate as a prime example of that. In biblical times, love meant to be dedicated to something. It wasn't necessarily emotional at all. And to hate meant to reject something. It wasn't emotional either. It wasn't emotional either. So if I sit there and I say, I reject stealing, I will not steal, and I'll stay away from people who do. It's not emotional. There's a functionality to it. And there's many terms that are like that. You translate it nowadays and the definition has changed over time. It means something else to different people. And Moki says, you know them by their actions. Exactly. And Sven says, my people perish for lack of understanding. Yes, they do. And even the elect will be deceived, as it were. Hi, Granny Smith. Now I have 4 felines in the room. 4 felines in the room. And I just found that to be all, again, terribly disheartening, very disturbing, that all of these churches, which they were already supporting her during the trial. And Brian says, I try not to say Jesus Christ in vain or oh my God. I will fix that for you, Brian. When they say do not use the Lord's name in vain, it is in reference to oath taking. So what it's really calling on you for, like if you stub your toe and you go, oh, Jesus, it's not the same thing. The best way to describe it is if I were to sit there and I say, I call on the name specifically. Keep in mind, God is a title. It's not a name. All right. If you wanted to, Yehovah would be the correct term. Yud-He, Vav-He, spelt in Hebrew for the actual name of God, not Jehovah, like you would hear in the modern church, is Yehovah. So if I said, Yehovah, I promise that if this happens, I'll do this, and then you can't do it, you've taken the Lord's name in vain. You've tarnished the name by making a promise, taking an oath that you cannot fulfill or have no intention of fulfilling. It's a different concept altogether. Unknown Knows says it's pretty interesting how the UMC decided to pander to a tiny percentage of the population, of which nearly all of them will never attend a single UMC service. And that goes for all of it. You see it all over the place. Like in comic books, they're a great example right now where they have very heavily pandered to the alphabet mafia, as it were. Do you think they're out there buying comic books? You think they care about that at all? Right, Granny? Granny Smith is a real sweetheart. Very interesting cat. Kimberly says they worked with a few preachers at an insurance agency many years ago. One of them straight out admitted he was preaching for the money. He said he and the other preacher treated us office ladies awful. That's a shame. And Brian says, thanks. No problem. I really ought to do a whole series on that kind of stuff. I don't regard myself as any sort of a religious authority by any means, but my wife and I have studied it very intently over the last decade. The history, proper translations of terminology and things like that. It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of things, biblically speaking, that people question constantly, and now that I've studied as much as I have, I sit there and I'm like, why don't people know this? Because they don't bother to learn, or they get misled, or they heard it from an authority, and so they assume it's correct. One is, oh God, where is it in Revelation? A creature with 4 different heads, the head of a man, head of a lion, so on and so forth. And what do those heads mean? And I've heard a million debates on it. It's in Deuteronomy. It tells you what it is. Because it's like if you read the Old Testament, you can see it. Basically, the tent of the tabernacle that housed the Ark of the Covenant would be in the center of the camp. And, the camp would park somewhere for a few weeks, a few months, however long, and then they'd move. I know this turned into a big can of worms here, but I'll wrap it up here in a second and we'll move on. In that camp, there was a positioning of where each tribe should center themselves around the tent of the tabernacle. And each tribe always set up their camp in the same exact position. North, south, east, west immediately was 4 specific tribes, and then another 4 around that. The 4 tribes that were the closest, north, south, east, and west, to the tabernacle, the standards of that tribe, the flag or banner that was posted to represent that specific tribe, match the heads of the angel with the 4 heads that's talked about in Revelations. Moki says, do you like 70 times 6? What's 70 times 6 supposed to be? It depends on what you're talking about. Nature Nerd says, go to a comic book store in the mall, see Superman kissing a guy on the cover, next store. Yeah. And they had to shut that comic down. Nobody was buying it. Nobody cared about that. Nobody wanted to see that. Nobody wanted to see that. And that was Superman's son. I forget what the character's name was supposed to be specifically, but that was Superman's son. And Fluke Man is here. Glad you could make it, Fluke Man. As we move on here, we were talking about Fani Willis and her heavy religious endorsements from the Black church leadership in the Atlanta area. And the things that they were saying, they were making her sound like Saint Fani Willis, that God sent her and she represents Jesus Christ. And it was just crazy. Associated Press article, as we get to another subject here, the yearly memorial march at the former death camp at Auschwitz, overshadowed by the Israel-Hamas war. Basically, they literally had the audacity to go out there and do their pro-Palestinian protest at the annual march, which I'm surprised there wasn't more of a buildup around this, because you're talking about a country where even the swastika is illegal. You go to jail. So here we go. Holocaust survivors and survivors of the October 7th attack on Israel were among thousands who took part Monday in the March of the Living, a yearly memorial march at the site of Auschwitz that honors the 6 million Jews killed by Nazi Germany and celebrates the state of Israel. 6 million that they know of. This year, the mood at the march was overshadowed by the war in Gaza after the October attack on Israel by Hamas, the deadliest violence against Jews since Adolf Hitler's regime sought to destroy the entire population of Europe. The attack, in which Hamas militants killed 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and took some 250 people hostage, unleashed a deadly Israeli offensive that has killed over 34,000 Palestinians, destroyed much of Gaza, and pushed hundreds of thousands of people to the brink of famine. Israel's Gaza offensive has been fueling pro-Palestinian protests, well, I don't think they've been fueling it, but I think outside influence has been fueling it. As has been pointed out in several of the articles we've read in the last week or so, the Soros Foundation is funding a lot of those college and university protests. Its supporters have branded the protest as anti-Semitic, while critics of Israel say it uses such allegations to silence opponents. Can we get to the point here? In the Polish town of Oświęcim, a small group of pro-Palestinian protesters waving Palestinian flags stood alongside the road as participants marched with Israeli flags from the Auschwitz site in the Polish town of Oświęcim, if I'm pronouncing that correct, to that of Birkenau, about 3 kilometers or 2 miles away. The area was under German occupation during World War II, and today the former death camps are preserved as memorials by the Polish state. And yeah, that takes a lot of nerve to go out here to something that has nothing to do with what's going on in Gaza and give them a hard time like that. That's embarrassing. Fluke Man says, how do you reply to people on live podcasts like The Unknown Knows was just talking to me? I don't know if I forget how to do it. There's a way to do your setting that that you can see comments from both channels if you're on Coffee Talk Live or Prepper University. I don't know how to set that up, but it can be done from the viewer's end. Also, if you wanted to specifically call out The Unknown Knows, you put an @ at the front of their name, so they should get a notification. Brian says you can be arrested in European countries for saying the Holocaust was a lie or fabricated. Yeah, and that's what Unknown answered that question. I didn't see that. Dragon says the level of ignorance and prejudice displayed by pro-Palestinian demonstrators is off the scale. It is. People died there. People were tortured to death in those places, and that is primarily to honor their memory. And to have the nerve to go out there and do that, and you wonder why there's a huge pushback now suddenly against that. Although, you know, a lot of these colleges and universities ought not to be so surprised that there is so much activism going on their campuses right now, because they basically breed and encourage activists. They just didn't expect those activists to turn on them. But it shouldn't come as a surprise, because as we all know, people like that tend to eat their own. So they turned on the college campuses and universities. You can't do enough for them. They'll never be satisfied. Never. Never. And Sven says, and yet policies are pushed that will allow another Holocaust. And there's possibility for that. There's room for that, unfortunately. It remains to be seen what direction this is going to go in. But I just found that I wanted to mention that. I had brought it up the other day. I wanted to show this because I found it particularly distasteful that they had to come out here to do that demonstration and interrupt their march, honoring the fallen, as it were, during World War II. Not that anybody even knows anything about World War II anymore. Not that they have any idea. Not that it's really taught in schools, that World War II or World War I or the Vietnam War, Korea, name it. Are they really talking about any of this? barely scratching the surface, perhaps. It's a waste. Not that history should even be taught until high school. I don't think it should be taught until the high school level, not really, because it serves no purpose until then. But, these kids aren't learning anything anyways. And H12 says they used to wonder how events were forgotten. Now I understand. Yeah, unfortunately. We'll never forget. Yeah, how's that 9/11 business going? We'll never forget. Sure. It's already faded. It's already faded from the collective memory. Yeah, they'll still put on a show for you, but it's faded. Nature Nerd says, so the protesters are Nazis for protesting Gaza in a World War II concentration camp. What idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They saw an opportunity to give anything that looked pro-Israel a hard time, and so they did. And Brian says they teach stuff like China in 300 BC. Very trivial. Well, they teach a lot of trivia in public school especially. But what is trivia? Trivia is, by definition, useless information. Useless information. And Helter says, in a world of 8 billion people, these misguided people find the need to vent their anger and hatred on 15 million people. And yeah. There's better things that they could focus that energy on. Better things. Better things. Unfortunately. Oops. Do we have a hiccup there? Are we back on? I saw a blip. I saw a blip, and I just want to make sure everything is still good. As we jump to the University of Chicago, speaking of which, since we were on the subject, and this is an Associated Press article, colleges that have been permissive of pro-Palestinian protests began taking a tougher stance because they've, many of these universities where they've gone through the trouble of clearing people out, they're going back and setting camp back up again. And that begs the question, that begs the question again, how is it that these colleges and universities, since they breed nowadays activists, why and how are they surprised that these activists are turning on them, tearing up their universities, causing problems? It says University President Paul Alivastos acknowledged the school's role as a protector of freedom of speech after officers in riot gear blocked access to the school's quad, but also took an enough is enough stance. The university remains a place where discerning voices have many avenues to express themselves, but we cannot enable an environment where the expression of some dominates and disrupts the healthy functioning of the community for the rest. It's a little late. Look at these people with the Shema. You even know what you're doing? Since April 18th, over 2,600 people have been arrested on the campuses of 50 colleges and universities, according to figures based on Associated Press reporting and statements from universities and law enforcement agencies, but not all schools are taking that approach. The president at Wesleyan University, a liberal arts school in Connecticut, a worthless school, has commended the on-campus demonstration, which includes a pro-Palestinian tent encampment, as an act of political expression. Of course, they're a liberal arts college, so they'll give you a degree that you have no use for. How many liberal arts degrees do you think businesses are looking for? How many? It's on the list. I have a list here of, not right in front of me, but a list I've been mulling over of 20 degrees according to Microsoft and their polls, that businesses, when they get that degree, when they get that on a resume, oh, I've got a master's degree in this or that, that resume probably is going to end up in the shredder because they don't want those degrees. They're useless. And liberal arts is on that list. What are you going to do with it? Gender studies is on that list. Anthropology is on that list. Social studies is on that list. But the only thing that was on that list that I don't necessarily agree with is education. I guess it depends on what kind of education. Because I saw education on that list. I've got a degree in education. Well, more specifically, early childhood development was my my field of expertise. Early childhood development. Moki says the United States started to look like Germany and Rome. And Nature Nerd says the U.S. can get away with not teaching history since it's a newer, isolated country compared to Europe and Asia, which have thousands of years of history to think about and not forget. That's why you do Western Civ 1 and 2. The Iron Dome works well. It blocks thousands of missiles a year from hitting Israel. That's true. Then the countries that strike Israel play the victim when Israel responds. Protesters don't realize this. Yeah, and the Iron Dome, it's mobile units. It's mobile units that run around the perimeter of Israel. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they cut off incoming missiles and rockets, basically. Dragon says, cut off tax money to these colleges and let these ignorant kids work for an education. Then they would be at work like the majority of the middle class. Yeah, then they'd be too busy to cause trouble. And Sven says a degree in general dumbassery and horse shittery. Exactly. That's what I want my degree in. I mean, I already feel like my degree's worthless as it is, and it's better than this stuff. But yeah, and that's something we can go over. I've got it lined up. Just taking a look at these degrees that these companies, they don't want. Philosophy was on that list. Oh, I've got a doctorate in philosophy. And what are you going to do? Better go write a book and hope people buy it because it doesn't jive with anything that you might use in the business world or in most other places. What are you going to do? Kimberly says, do you think they would this would have happened if student loans were not being paid off by hardworking Americans? No, but also not just that. Not just that. I mean, if they had to pay their own way through college, better yet that they couldn't even get a loan. That they have to work to pay it off. When I was coming up, I knew a lot of people that worked to pay for their college. They were working while in college. Better yet, that a lot of these colleges and universities were not receiving money from foreign donors, something we've talked about a lot in the last few weeks as all of this has been unfolding. They've been getting money from Lebanon, from Iran, from China, from Yemen, from places that have no business giving literally billions of dollars to colleges and universities in the United States. And then, yeah, you think they're influencing things? Money talks, unfortunately. Money talks. And that's just the reality of it. And again, I mean, some of you have heard me talk about it already. This was under investigation during the Trump administration. He wanted to know where the money was coming from and why the universities weren't disclosing it. He wanted to know why there was no transparency. Why won't you tell us what foreign country made donations? I want to know where that money's coming from because it might be an influence on your university. And then when Biden got into office, they turned off those investigations. And it came up again a few months ago because it had been revealed that in the last 5 years, some $8+ billion have been funneled into colleges and universities in the United States from the Middle East and from China. Nature Nerd says no reason colleges have to be 401k to 100 or 40,000 to 100,000 a year. And Flukeman says these students from families have some money, let them beg their parents. beg at their parents' front door. Yeah, let them. Well, I mean, they're not going to work because they're just going to live off their parents' money if that's the case. They never learn to appreciate the value of it. Never learn to appreciate the value of it. So yeah, big surprise that this is going on. Another thing that I wanted to get back to, because it has come up, and that is the line in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the line who is scaling back their project, at least for now. And this is from Tech Explore, is the writer of this article. Scaling back of Saudi Arabia's proposed urban mega project sends a clear warning to other would-be utopias. Says there is a long history of planned city building by both governments and private sectors from Brasilia to Islamabad. Most recently, or more recently, two trends have come together in a new wave of visual urban planning. On the one hand, there are the neoliberal special economic zone policies that accelerated in the 1980s and which have become an almost unquestioned global economic article of faith. In other words, they don't work. On the other, there is the, quote, smart city, in which ubiquitous sensing and surveilling generate big data from which solutions to all the problems of cities are supposed to be found. Now, with the fairy dust of artificial intelligence sprinkled on top, we have the recipe for almost every current proposal for new cities. In essence, the contemporary ideal city is a data-driven free market paradise. Hardly. Then it goes on to say the conservative and authoritarian, kingdom of Saudi Arabia is very much aware that the end is in sight for the fossil fuel economy that underpins its sovereign and private wealth. I don't know if that's necessarily true because electric vehicles thus far have been a failure, as have wind farms and solar farms, which I did 2 videos on last week talking about in great detail for all the good it did, because hardly anybody has seen them. In anticipation of the inevitable end of fossil fuels, which likely won't be for another 200 years at the rate that technology's going with that, Rieda is actively working to shift to new sources of income so as to future-proof its economy of carbon in a carbon zero world. And, talking about the line, it says under the banner of Vision 2030, it's been investing its oil profits in dozens of eye-catching urban projects, from free ports to cities built around theme parks. So we get to the line, the NEOM project, rather. And it talked a lot about NEOM. It says the line was envisioned as a 170-kilometer linear city clad in reflective material that would cut into the deep desert from the Red Sea like the one of the swords of the Saudi flag. The evangelical advertisements for NEOM promised freedom and multiculturalism in one of the most authoritarian and monocultural nations on earth, as well as total surveillance and advanced AI to underpin innovation for all its residents. And according to this, it says almost as soon as ground had been broken, it was announced the centerpiece plan had been scrapped. The line is no more, and in its place are plans for a much smaller 2.4 kilometer long city, a dash compared to the line's original misguided ambitions. Okay. So they're reducing their project by like 90%. However, I got to wonder if they didn't get what they wanted out of this. So, okay, it's not going to be 170 kilometers anymore. It's going to be like less than 3 kilometers long. But they've already gone and cleared the path, and in the process, wiped out a lot of indigenous communities that the government didn't like because they were too independent, living out there in the desert by themselves. They burned villages. They herded people, killed people. Activists on behalf of resisting the line project were disappeared. You didn't see that in the news, did you? People were killed. People dropped off the face of the earth. Activists who were operating on behalf of the indigenous people that the line project needed to eradicate in order to set it up. So even if they can't finish the line by 2030, Saudi Arabia got what it wanted because it got rid of those people after all, didn't they? Which could have been the entire point all along. Something I speculated on when I talked about the line last year, or the NEOM project, as it's properly termed. So now it's only going to be, what they say, 2.4 kilometers? Is that right? Yeah, 2.4 kilometers, and then they'll take it from there. So they're going to do it a piece at a time instead of building the whole thing at once. And Moki says people are now leaving out the degree in their resumes. Are they? You know, no one reads those resumes. They only actually glance over the cover page anyway. Helter says the original concept is horrendously impractical. For the same cost, they can build several conventional cities where people will actually want to live, not just visit as a weird tourist attraction. And Dragon says making such a city in the middle of the desert was ridiculous from the beginning with no water resources, just seawater. Well, they can filter that seawater and make it viable. And that was the idea. Unknown No says Grand Linear Metropolis downsized to Stick Figure Township. And he says, so the Saudis pulled an Andrew Jackson. There you go. And Sven says, who does Saudi Arabia think they are? America? Well, they're a lot worse than America. Trust me. Because, you know, they don't even need to try to hide it. They just wiped out those people, and you can find information on that. You can find information on that on online if you dig far enough about the activists who disappeared or were killed in an accident or during handling in an arrest. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Saudi Arabia is a lot worse. I know as bad as America is or seems, there are far worse places that you could be living. So line project, and like I said, it had been brought up off and on over the last couple of weeks, so I wanted to get to it here. And I doubt they were doing it because they're worried that oil is going to be no more because we're so green now. Oil hasn't gone anywhere. Okay, oil hasn't gone anywhere because, again, the electric, it doesn't work. The electric vehicles don't work. I had a lot of people give me a real hard time talking about electric vehicles in that one video. And I challenged them to just ask anybody who lives in Illinois how it went for them this winter. I'm sure many of you are aware, and we even read the stories on it. Thousands of electric vehicles, Teslas and others, were stranded all over Illinois because it was so cold they would not charge. So yeah, I really want an electric car. I'd fare better out here because, you know, Georgia doesn't get that cold. But there are many places in many situations where it's completely impractical. Nature Nerd says 1 mile but cleared 100 miles for construction. People must be pissed. Yeah, I'm sure all the people that were forced out of their homes and had their villages burned were really upset. Monkey says, you hear the Boy Scouts of America changing their name to Scouting America to make it more inclusive. That sounds familiar. I don't know if I've read a story on it, though. Who got a notification? Asking real quick. I did not get my notification today, nor did I get it yesterday. 2 days in a row, I did not get a notification telling me that I'm live. Because it's important. I want people to know in case they want to participate, in case they want to come on to the live portion. And, you know, even just to say hello, or, you know, if they have a question or they, you know, they want to talk about something that's in one of the articles. And I've been cut off from that. Brian says electric and electronic devices even shut off or lose batteries faster in cold temperatures. That's true. That's true. And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem. So they're too unreliable. They're too heavy. I mean, your average electric car weighs roughly 1,000 pounds more than its gas counterpart. And H12 said they got notification about 10 minutes in, and Unknown Nose says they set an alarm on their cell. Yeah, but you should be notified by YouTube, and people are not. Not enough people are getting notified. Some are, some are not. And like I said, I'm subscribed to myself so I can check that. And sometimes I get a notice and sometimes I don't. Usually it's at about 20 or 30 minutes in even, and that's kind of late. That's kind of late, unfortunately. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead. We are at the top of the hour and I'll start signing off. So you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you could find me at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University on YouTube Monday through Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you want to join in. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, on at Coffee Talk Chat. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, who tells me now you can find me on Apple. I'm going to have to check that. I'm going to have to check on that because I haven't seen that. Thanks again to everybody who was able to join us here today. Hope you got something out of the conversation, and we will see you all again